Okay, let's get one that is not members only. For those of you who don't know, let me show you. Damn it. Let me show you. The most heretical last boss queen from Villainess to Savior. Volume 1. Chapter 1, The Selfish Princess Awakens. When my life flashed before my eyes, I found it remarkably normal. That isn't to say it was all smooth sailing, but compared to most, it was pretty darn ordinary. After getting accepted to a junior college in my senior year of high school, my only real dilemma was how I'd enjoy my break to the fullest. I skipped right along through life, daydreaming about replaying my favorite Otome series from the beginning. I was humming to myself, fantasizing about all the roots and romances when I stepped out onto the crosswalk just as a car barreled through the intersection. That was how life as I knew it ended. Your Highness, can you hear me? Princess Pride! Servants frantically called my name. I cradled my head and sank to the floor as the world faded to darkness around me. Someone call the doctor. We must tell the Queen and Prince Consort what's happened. The princess is hurt. My name was Pride Royal Ivy. I was the 8-year-old daughter of the Queen, the firstborn princess of my country. At least that's who I was here in the world of Our Ray of Light, the Otome game I'd planned on replaying. Why did I have to end up as Pride of all people? She wasn't just evil and devious. She was the final boss. I awoke in a plush bed, but I forced my eyes open, staring at the ceiling as maids flitted by, rushing in and out of the lavish room, arguing over details that my reeling mind couldn't quite grasp. I only have 10 years left. I can't believe I'm going to die at the same age in 2 different lives. Not unless you do something about it. My head spun, trying to sort the memories of my past life from the reality before me. Incredible as it sounded, I'd really woken up in a video game world. I knew the protagonists, the background characters, even the setting itself. I recognized every detail, and I knew I wouldn't live long. As Pride, I would destroy the kingdom in 10 years' time and terrorize this world as its final boss. Destiny decreed that I scarred the hearts of the love interests and paid for my crimes with my life. Indeed, this was the world of Our Ray of Light. It was a longer series than most, and from what I could tell, I was in the very first game. People of all ages enjoyed ORL, as we called it. I got hooked on the anime version of the 3rd game, and that infatuation grew until I played through every single installment from oldest to newest. Whenever they released a new one, I jumped right on it. I was obsessed. Pride. My father flung the door open with a bang, charging right past the flustered guards. Father. The Prince Consort scowled, or at least he seemed to. Everyone else mistook his wrinkled forehead and serious expression for sternness, but I knew just how kind he was beneath the surface. Sure, he could be strict, but he loved his daughter with all his heart. Wait, Prince Consort, so that means that she married someone who is not royalty. Okay. For some reason I was thinking that Prince Consort meant that was her brother. I don't know why. He shooed the maids and guards out of the room to speak with me privately. Are you alright? He asked me. Yes, my head started to hurt all of a sudden. A doctor says your life isn't in any danger, but Rosa was worried about you too. As Queen, Rosa Royal Ivy, my mother, was the highest authority in the kingdom. Needless to say, she outranked father in that regard. It was no surprise she was too busy to come see me herself, even under these circumstances. While father always told me she would visit me if she could, I now knew the true reason for her absence. Father, what is it? He asked. He said, watching me anxiously. I have a little sister who will soon turn 6, don't I? He blinked, taken aback, which only confirmed what I already knew. If this really was the world of my Otome game, then I had a younger sister, Tiara Royal Ivy, the protagonist of this whole story. How do you know that, Father? I said. It was the first time I'd ever seen such shock on my father's face. Something about my question threw him off, but I only just regained my memories, so I wasn't sure what. Wait, this all seems familiar somehow. Could it be, he said? Do you share the same precognition as your mother? Is that what made you collapse? Father stared down at me, his gaze never wavering, and gently brushed my hair off my brow. I'd inherited my father's crimson locks, my mother's soft waves. Yes, he mused. My congratulations, Pride. This proves you are the true heir to the throne. Father beamed at me, tears forming in his eyes. I, meanwhile, tried not to cry for a wholly different reason. For the few simple words, I'd royally messed up. Now, all I could do was try not to scream as the gravity of the whole situation sunk in. That's right. I was thinking of Prince Pride's childhood in the game. You see, with that one simple line about my sister, I just marched beat for beat toward my own doom. Oh, you've set up a doom flag. Fudge. Our ray of light was set in the sprawling kingdom of Frezia, a mysterious land and the only place in the world where humans were born with special powers. Naturally, that included my precognition. While 1 out of every couple hundred people would inherit some kind of power, precognition was the rarest. It belonged solely to those in line for the Frisian throne and existed only among members of the royal family, especially women, manifesting once every few decades. Many viewed precognition as a divine message anointing our next ruler. In the game, Pride fainted when she was 8 years old. When she awoke, she mentioned a younger sister who had been kept secret from her. She said all this to her father on the very day he planned to reveal the secret himself. It was the moment her precognition awakened and she earned the title of the future Queen of Frisia. But that's exactly what just happened to me! Yep, you just went through it beat for beat. When the love interests talked about this scene, they called it the moment that would lead to unimaginable tragedy for our kingdom. Even as dread sank cold into my gut, my father's face lit up with joy, but I knew things were playing out exactly the same way as they had in the game. Guilty as it made me feel, I needed to make this seem like anything but precognition, but however, when I opened my mouth, no words escaped. Father noticed my confused expression, but he apparently took it for exhaustion. Get some rest for now, Pride, he said. I know you're still confused, so we'll talk about your sister Tiara some other time. He offered a smile before he rose and left, surely on his way to tell Mother of this momentous development. The instant he exited, the guards and maids swept back in. My sister, I muttered. I turned to the window, staring out at the gardens below as though I could escape that way, but I already know everything about her. For example, I knew my younger sister Tiara Royal Ivy inherited our parents' compassion and grace. My mother carried herself with poise and wisdom, while my kind-hearted father served as her assistant. Frail, delicate little Tiara was the protagonist of this game, a sweet princess who had to be kept a secret to protect her from kidnapping and assassination attempts. Makes sense. Tiara. Even her name was cute. Unlike Pride, a rough, overbearing name suited for the villain of the story. I teared up just thinking about her, but that was wrong. So very wrong. My little heart simply couldn't take the waves of emotion, and soon I was desperately sniffling, trying to keep the snot and tears inside me. I would become the wicked final boss, and Tiara would become the heroine. During every single route in the game, Pride died at the hands of the main characters. Even the bad ending simply had Tiara or a love interest take Pride's place. No matter how I looked at it, I was doomed. Moreover, I deserved it. Tiara and her love interest were good, honest people. I wouldn't dare cheat my way to a bad ending with my past life memories. By the end, Pride was so completely evil she deserved nothing better than death. As much as I loved the game, I certainly wasn't a fan of Pride when I played ORL in real life. Fans of the love interest especially hated Pride, and some of that hatred seeped into me now. I lashed out at the table beside my bed, frustrated to find myself in the body of someone I detested. A maid jerked at the sound of the kick and the table rattling. Oh, I'm sorry, I said. Shoot. It's things like this that'll add up to make me the wicked queen. The wide-eyed maid simply straightened out the table. There's no need to apologize, she said stiffly, shooting me nervous glances out of the side of her eye. Well, no surprise there. Pride, or I suppose I, didn't hold back at all with the maids. I'd fired many and even threatened some with death if they displeased me. Of course, Father intercepted all my attempts to punish them. The normal Pride would have sent the table flying across the room and screamed at the maids to fix it at once. But I couldn't act like that, not while retaining my memories of my previous life. I didn't want to be like that Pride. I couldn't be like that Pride. In that game, Pride used precognition to torment the love interests and allow tragedies to unfold, but I wanted to take a different course. If only I knew more than just the existence of my sister. If only I knew about my father's... I leaped out of bed with a gasp. The maids all spun toward me. Even the guards outside the door rushed into my room. A flurry of voices asked me what was wrong. But I brushed them all aside. Where's Father? I said. His Royal Highness just left to inform Her Majesty of today's events, a maid informed me. This is bad. At this rate, he'll... Stop him right now, I ordered. He can't get on that carriage. But Her Majesty is here at the residence, so I don't believe he'll need to take a carriage. It was no use. The maid stuck here at my bed, so I didn't realize the Queen's plans might have changed. I rushed to the window, sticking my head out to view the sprawling garden below. A single carriage sat parked before the house. My father approached it alone, preparing to go see my mother. Contrary to the maid's assertion, Mother was back at the main castle, attending to urgent business, and this was precisely where Father planned to go. No, he can't take that carriage. Father! I screamed. He froze, but then he simply waved up at me. No, I'm not saying goodbye. I intended to warn him, but he carried on blissfully unaware. I couldn't just go on yelling for him not to board the carriage. He'd think I was a kid throwing a tantrum. In that case, I placed my foot on the windowsill and leaned out past the frame. Father's pleasant smile melted into raw fear. Oh, dear. He sees this, he's going to come rushing over, which is exactly what she's hoping for, I'm guessing. My room, the room of a firstborn princess, easily rose higher than an average house. A fall would be fatal. So essentially he's going to try and catch you or stop you. Your Highness, the maid behind me blurted. Stop that at once. Stay back, I said. It'll be your head if you stop me. I lifted myself up to stand on the windowsill. If I'd lost my footing, I'd plummet to the ground. The wind gusted against me, sending my long hair streaming behind me. I could hardly breathe aside from panicked sips of air. Get down from there, Pride, Father shouted far below, his face twisted with terror. Well, I definitely got his attention. Thank goodness. I steadied myself by clutching the post and forced down a deep breath. Father, I yelled down to him, you can't board that carriage. It has a broken wheel, and you'll get into an accident before you can speak to Mother. Even from a distance, I could see him blinking in confusion. I mean, he did just say she had precognition, so don't you think that would have been something to take into account if she told him this? Like, maybe it's a result of this? You know? For the second time today, I'd shocked him with one of my pronouncements. I hardly got the words out before one of the guards grabbed me and yanked me back into the room. Back outside, my father's voice rose as he demanded someone inspect the carriage's wheels. Oh, crisis averted! Now I can relax a little. This time, at least, I thwarted the events of the game. In ORL, Pride's father boarded the carriage to rush to the Queen and inform her of Pride's newly awakened precognition. But the carriage collapsed, gravely injuring him. He survived only long enough to tell the Queen of Pride's gift with his dying breaths. Somehow, Pride never foresaw her father's accident. Not in the game, at least. Here, where I knew the whole story, I could save him. It was truly a blessing. The guard loosened his grip when he realized I wasn't resisting. I turned relieved, but yelped when I saw a maid curled up on the floor in tears. Everyone else stood frozen around her, their faces pale and bloodless. Only that one guard seemed capable of speaking. Are you hurt, Your Highness? He asked me. Before I could answer, an older maid stepped in front of the one crying on the ground. She fell to her knees at my feet. Please, Your Highness, forgive her. She has nowhere else to go, so I beg of you, please show her mercy. She trembled as she apologized over and over before me. Whoops, might have overdone it there. Yeah, you really shouldn't have threatened her, but I mean, you couldn't really stop, because if you did, the events would play out, and you didn't want you to lose your father, you know? I should have known better than to throw around threats, even in the heat of the moment. The maid apparently believed I really would have her executed for trying to stop me in the window. I was the crown princess, after all. Everyone around me was at the mercy of my whims. Once again, Pride's selfish whims, my selfish whims, had caused so much pain. I wanted to apologize, but the more I thought about it, the more my head spun. Even the guard who'd pulled me away from the window must have been bracing for some sort of punishment, yet he reached out to protect the precious daughter of the Queen anyway. I'm sorry, I said. Perhaps the emotions were just too much for an 8-year-old's body. Something reached into my chest and squeezed all the air out of my lungs. I burst into tears before I could stop myself. The guard and maids all looked on in bewilderment as I saw before them babbling out tear-thickened apologies. From the 18 years of experience I'd gained in my past life, I knew just how much fear power could instill in others and just how much grief could come from having that power used against you. More than anything, I wanted to engrave these facts into my mind for the 10 remaining years of my life so that I could never forget or abuse this authority I'd woken up into. After all, I was the crown princess of this kingdom. Father eventually came back up to my room. He consoled me while I cried until I calmed enough to speak, and he made me swear never to do anything so reckless again. Though he did confess that the attendants found one cracked wheel and one defective one where they inspected the carriage. I owe you my life. Thank you, Pride, he said, wrapping me in his arms. Aww. Almost as quickly as I'd managed to stop crying, the tears flowed again. Aww. Later that day, when Mother returned to the castle, Father recounted the day's events to her. I became the official heir to the throne at that point, and the news of my awakened power spread to the people of the kingdom. When Father tried to ask my guards and maids what exactly happened, I placed myself between him and the servants. It was all my fault, I said. These people were only looking out for me, so if anyone deserves punishment, it's me. But Father just smiled and shook his head, and I realized he'd never intended to punish anyone in the first place. That night, Father stayed by my side until I fell asleep. He hadn't done that for me in ages. He spoke softly and soothingly, telling me about my younger sister Tiara like it was a bedtime story. He said he planned to tell me about her that very day before I blurted it out myself. I would get to meet her in 1 month on her birthday, but until then I wouldn't see her or Mother much. It turned out the Queen had to spend a lot of time looking after stickly little Tiara on top of all her other duties. He stroked my hair so like his and my mother's as he described Tiara more. You and Tiara are both our precious daughters. Nothing could ever change that, he said, his gaze brimming with affection. I had to wonder if the pride in the game would turn into a corrupted evil queen if her father had gotten to live and say such lovely things to her all the time. It was still possible, of course, but maybe his kindness would have changed the course of events for her. It's a possibility. You'll never know now. Or no, you will know now because you'll get to experience it, maybe, but you wouldn't have known in the game. Father warned that the pace of my studies would pick up now that I was officially recognized as the heir to the throne. He rattled off a list of subjects governing local history, etiquette, procedures, and my eyelids grew heavy as lead. I drifted off to the sound of his voice, the deep rumble of his soothing tone as he debated adopting a little brother to serve as my assistant now. Wait, a brother? Oh, interesting. Wait, adopting? Really? Okay. I won't forgive you. I'll never forgive you. I'm gonna kill you. A boy was crying, his tearful eyes ablaze with pure hatred. He stared straight ahead at a girl who cackled right back at him, a girl too young to soften her laugh to be more ladylike. She clutched her sides as she laughed down at the boy. How foolish can you be? You can never kill me, after all. I knew both of these people. No, it was more than that. That girl was me. Pride Royal Ivy. She, or rather I, was the girl who irreparably scarred the hearts of all the game's love interests. My younger sister Tiara would swoop in to heal their wounds. After I received my punishment at the end of the game, Tiara would take my seat as the queen and set the kingdom back on the path to harmony alongside her love interest. I remember this scene from the game. From what I can recall, it was the memory of one of the love interests. Why did you trick me, the boy said. I wanted to see her, that's all. The boy gritted his teeth, tears tracking down his cheeks while I pointed at him and howled with laughter. That laugh was too big, too cruel, too evil to fit inside one little girl. And yet there I was. Meanwhile, the boy kept calling out for someone. I missed her so much, the boy said. Oh, that's right, you better keep this a secret, I said. Not that anyone would listen to a dirty former commoner like you. Wait, is this supposed to be your brother? Weird. I kept in my laughter, and the boy howled until his voice went hoarse. Over and over again, he cried out that he would kill me. His name was Stale. Stale Royal Ivy, Pride's adopted younger brother-in-law. Brother-in-law? Huh? Adopted younger brother-in-law. Is he supposed to be adopted so he would marry Tiara? Okay, now I'm a little confused. Adopted brother, I could get. I understand that. But adopted younger brother-in-law? That's kind of weird. Somebody explain that to me, please? Someone save him. He hadn't done anything wrong, but I couldn't do anything for him. After all, I was the one who hurt him. The one who could help him, the one who was his only salvation from the life he lived at the castle, was his adopted younger sister-in-law. Why is it like this? Tiara. I opened my eyes with a gasp, just a dream, but I recognized the events from the game. The moment I awoke, my maids launched into my morning routine, starting with grooming. I glared back into my own dark eyes in the mirror, watching one of the women comb through my hair. Those eyes were so much like Father's, just like the bright red of my hair, even if the waves came from Mother. Father beamed with pride to have a daughter who inherited so much of him, but I couldn't help thinking the combination of purple eyes and bright red hair made me look like a witch, or a final boss. I struggled not to wince at the reflection of the wicked enemy of ORL staring right back at me. No one wanted to look at such a thing early in the morning. In the game, Pride took the throne quickly thanks to her newly awakened precognition, seizing the opportunity after her father died in the accident, and her mother followed after him from grief. Ooh. Now that they're both still alive, I am curious as to what will happen with this. What would have happened had you been able to change the events in the game? That is a good question. Sadly, you'll have to see it in real life. And live it, actually. Still, she was spiteful about her mother's disproportionate attention toward her younger sister. Thus, Pride sent Tiara away to live in a distant castle, creating a life of luxury for herself as she ruled over the country with an iron fist. The surrounding countries grew increasingly worried as Pride turned into a dictator. But all of that wouldn't happen for 10 or more years, on the day of Tiara's 16th birthday. In the meantime, Tiara met her many love interests, healed the trauma they carried in their hearts, and stood up to Pride, deepening the rift between them. Eventually, Tiara's own powers of precognition emerged, bestowing upon her the same divine mark of leadership. Princess Pride, Your Highness? Huh? The maid's voice finally dragged me back to the present. It was the same woman who'd been so overcome with terror that she cried on the floor the other day. Now she gently set my hair down, having finished brushing it. Remarkably, she didn't seem to hate me for the incident. If anything, she'd become kinder, more tender, as she chuckled and told me my hair was all combed through. How did I never notice until now? I have such a wonderful maid working for me. She's very... Wait. I cocked my head in confusion. Now that I thought about it, I hardly knew anything about this woman. What's your name? I asked. The maid raised her eyebrows before she could compose herself and smiled sweetly. Lottie. Lottie? I'm just going to say Lottie. I don't care. I made a point of asking the names of other servants as I made my way through the castle that morning. The older maid who defended Lottie was Mary. The guard who pulled me out of the window was Jack. I committed these 3 names to memory. Lottie, Mary, and Jack. Such a simple thing, yet it was like opening the curtains and letting the sun shine into this dreary castle. This was the first time anyone apart from Father had added vibrance to my world. I spent much of the day that way. It wasn't long before I noticed the staff looking at me a little differently. I was still the firstborn princess, of course, and the official heir to the throne, but that wasn't the only change. Rumors swirled about how I'd saved my father from that carriage ride. The spoiled little princess finally learned how to behave? The bratty princess must have been possessed by a goddess. You have no idea. Not really a goddess, but more like someone from another world. Some people seem to believe that developing precognition was the reason my personality changed so drastically. I don't know. I bit my tongue and let them believe whatever they liked, even though I wanted nothing more than to tell them they were all wrong. I wasn't possessed by a goddess or anything like that. I simply regained the memories of my past life. Certainly in the game, precognition did little to improve Pride's sinister personality. If anything, she became more vile. But now I appeared to be, to them, much more competent to rule the kingdom in the future. By afternoon, I couldn't remember that morning's dream anymore, even though something about it seemed so important. You should have wrote it down. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the names of the love interests weren't coming to me either. I knew there were 5 total in the series, including certain hidden characters. Also, I could still recall the plot of the game from replaying it over and over to get all the endings. However, I didn't remember many details about the love interests themselves. My favorite was the 3rd game in the series, which I've replayed now and again, but I only ever fully cleared the 1st and 2nd games. 1 each at that. How could I forget games I played so obsessively in life? Even on the day I died, I'd been daydreaming about replaying this series all over again from the 1st game. It's fine. I'm sure I'll remember the details when I meet everyone, since my life follows the same plot as the game. Except that all depended on this life being the same as the plot of the game, and, well, I'd already gone and changed that. The mere fact that both my parents were alive proved deviation was possible. Which means she might never run into them, essentially. Can I actually change the story of the game? It was a little late for me to make that realization, but it struck me like a slap to the face. What else could I change? How much could I change? I didn't have much time to think it over. At dinner the next day, Father said my adopted brother-in-law, one of the game's love interests, will be arriving at the castle in 2 weeks. How far have I gotten? Only 22 pages in? Dang. Okay. Chapter 2, The Wicked Princess and the Adopted Brother-in-Law. This kind of reminds me of, My Next Life is a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, except, it wasn't adopted brother-in-law, it was just your adopted brother as one of the love interests. Interesting. I wonder how this is going to go. How utterly depressing. Steo, my little brother, was finally due to arrive at the castle. I still couldn't wrap my head around having a brother-in-law. Even adopted one. I mean, I was only 8 years old, a bit young for that kind of thing. I even tried to convince Father to drop it, but he insisted we adhere to the tradition. In Frisia, custom demanded the heir to the throne have a special assistant or servant, a boy adopted into the family precisely for this purpose. He had to be younger than the heir, which, combined with his gender, would make him ineligible for the title even once he became a member of the royal family, and shielded him from assassination attempts so he could perform his function. Stale? Why would somebody be named Stale? I sighed. I still found the whole thing weird. Stale probably suffered so much after being ripped away from his own family to serve mine. Stale Royal Ivy had lost his father to illness at a young age and spent his childhood with only his mother. While a commoner, he too possessed a special power. Stale could transport anything he touched, including himself, like a sort of teleportation. In the game, Pride took advantage of Stale's desire to return to his mother to lock him into a fealty contract. A horrible deal that forced him to obey Pride's every order without fail. He wasn't even an assistant at that point. He was just a puppet. Of course, I had no plan of putting him through anything like that, but I couldn't help worrying that my good intentions would mean little. For one thing, why would Stale listen to his new sister-in-law at all? And what would I do if he didn't? Would I become like the other Pride, the Pride from the game? Part of me feared she was the one making me think such ugly thoughts in the first place. In the game, she savored Stale's rage, his hatred. Ultimately, she forced him to commit an act he never recovered from. Oh, please tell me this is not... The act he never recovered from was not, assault. I hope not. Or maybe attacking her sister? I don't know. Your new brother-in-law has arrived at the castle, Your Highness, Lottie said, jolting me out of my anxious thoughts. Your father would like to introduce him to you. I had no choice but to follow her to where my father awaited, his hand resting on the shoulder of a boy with glossy black hair and dark eyes. Stale looked just the way I remembered him from the game, from his pale skin to the high bridge of his nose. Though youthful now, I knew he would grow into a quiet, intriguing, bespectacled, yet intelligent man. It seemed the glasses would come into the picture later. Pride, father said, this is Stale. He's to be your younger brother. Get my brother-in-law! It makes no sense to me! He's 1 year younger than you, and he'll be serving as your steward and assistant. Once you rule, he will be your seneschal? What's a seneschal? Someone let me know, please. I probably have to look it up later. Though he's a commoner, his power of teleportation is quite impressive. I expect the two of you will get along splendidly. At first I saw nothing but the character from the game, the Stale I expected. Then I noticed something I never saw in the game and jerked back a step. Everything about his appearance was ordinary enough, aside from the handcuffs binding his wrists. His hands weren't completely constricted, but it was still a shocking sight. Stale glared at the floor with a grim expression. Even a child could easily tell that these weren't normal handcuffs. They were made of some kind of shiny material and decorated with jewels. Ah, did the handcuffs startle you? Father asked. Well, I pity the boy. This is necessary for now. He kept escaping via teleportation while we were traveling here. Oh, it blocks his power. Okay, I get it. Makes sense. Especially if he doesn't want to do this. If he's being forced into this little thing, I imagine he would try to run away. I don't blame him at all. He even injured a guard at one point. He seems to have settled down for now, but we can't have him disappearing on us again. These shackles will prevent him from using his power until he can enter a subordination contract with you tomorrow. Then there'll be no point in keeping the chains on any longer. He stroked Stale's hair as he spoke, an oddly tender gesture when contrasted with his words. Yeah, I would have thought that he would be a nice daddy. I guess not. I guess he is in this world, considering that this is different from how we live in our world. Obviously, something like that would be a little more harsh, but I guess she'll have to win him over. I had to remind myself that all this was normal in this world, regardless of what my morals and ethics from my previous life dictated. Even the subordination contract was just an ordinary part of what my younger brother-in-law could expect. That contract existed so he could never betray me. It was a kind of bond found only in our kingdom and backed up by enchantment, so neither signer nor could break the contract So neither signer could break the conditions of the contract. My brother-in-law would need to remain within a certain physical distance of me at all times and remain loyal to my commands. The pride of the game took it a step further, forcing Stale to sign a bond of fealty. That was a stricter bond that tacked on compulsory obedience to every command. In ORL, Pride stole that contract from her dead father's study, switching it for the supposed subordination contract. Once you sign this, I'll let you see your mother again, she told him. From that moment on, Stale was doomed. Even if he signed a subordination contract, the stricter fealty contract always took precedence. Stale, the 7-year-old commoner who could read and write no more than his own name, only realized the horror of what he'd done after the contract was complete. But I'd never do something like that. I hope you won't. Here's hoping that contract that he signs is the subordination contract. Stale was still steadying his feet. I rushed to his side and took his shackled hands in mine, giving them a gentle squeeze. I'm Pride Royal Ivy, I said. It's so nice to meet you, Stale. We'll be family from here out, so let's get along, okay? Aww. I want to protect the poor kid. Stale looked up, blinking in surprise before his head wilted right back down. Okay, he murmured. What? Hold on, I think I've seen this before. My smile withered. I backed away from Stale as realization crept over me. Pride said those exact same lines during this scene in the game. Later, Stale spoke of his past and mentioned how kindly Pride had been when she approached him, acting like a compassionate older sister the very same night she forced him to sign that fealty contract. No. You better read over that contract, girl. You better read over that contract and make sure it's not a submission contract. Or not a fealty contract, I'm sorry. The board... I cannot talk. I knew it. I'm stuck in the same script from the game no matter what I do. No, actually, you're not, because you stopped your father and your mother from essentially dying. So you can change it. I froze. It's essentially, you just need to make sure to follow through with what you say, essentially. Don't act like how Pride would. I froze, despair welling up inside me, and Father stepped in front of Stale. You must be exhausted from the day's events, he said. Rest up so you're prepared for tomorrow. Then Father led Stale away toward his new room in the castle. Wait. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I just saw the next line, and it said, in the game, an assistant introduced Pride to Stale. Her father is the one who introduced him to Pride in this one. So, she wouldn't be able to sneak that fealty contract out of his study, really. Maybe not. So this might be changed anyway. So are things different because Father's alive now? Wait, and didn't something happen with that assistant? I dug through my memory to dredge up Father's assistant, but I couldn't recall the man. Father visited me alone most of the time, meaning I'd probably met this assistant a few brief times at most. Oh, what about Stale? I broke into a run chasing after Father and Stale. I had to know which room he'd be in, or else my plan would fall through. As I rushed after them, I realized I was headed right for the room below mine. Father stopped me outside the door. Let him rest for today, understand, he said. He waited for Lottie and Mary to escort me back to my own room. But that wasn't good enough. I had to talk to Stale before he signed the subordination contract tomorrow. It was late in the evening when Father and Pride coerced Stale into falling for her trap, which meant I might get a chance to talk to Stale sometime tonight. Lottie and Mary got me to my room, but I didn't stay long, claiming I wanted to see Father. They let me go, but rather than heading directly to him, I veered off toward his study. Just like in the game, I found guards in my path. And just like the Pride in the game, I managed to tiptoe past them and break into the study. I made quick work of rummaging through the room, stashing my prize in my dress before I snuck back out. That wouldn't be the end of my clandestine activities that night. Stale didn't appear at dinner, eating in his room instead due to fatigue. Well, I mean, considering he was trying to use his powers to get away that much, I imagine he would be tired. Later, I would sneak into the room just as Pride did in the game. What did you grab, though? That's what I want to know. I briefly considered a robe of bed sheets to clamber straight down out of the window, but the maids and guards had already seen me throw myself out of it before. Probably better not to make them think I was leaping out of it all over again. Plus, a princess couldn't behave in such an undignified manner. Then what exactly did Pride do? How do I get to Stale like in the game? I have to... Realization hit me, and a smile spread across my face. It faded just as quickly. I was truly becoming just like Pride, the same devious queen I'd loathed in the game. However, I couldn't linger on that thought. Once night fell, I picked a random book from my room and headed to Stale's room. The two guards stationed outside it raised their eyebrows at me. Your Highness? I smiled at them sweetly. Stale doesn't know how to read, I said, so I'd like to read this book to him. Father said that was a nice idea. I'd given the guards outside my own room the same story. It was a lie, certainly, but using my father's name meant they couldn't stop me. They hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. Stale, I'm coming in. The room lay cloaked in pitch-black darkness when I entered. Once the door closed behind me, I strained to make out anything around me. Only the faint moonlight filtering in through the window provided any help. Princess Pride, Stale said, is there something you need? I'm sorry to bother you so late, I said. I simply had to speak with you before you signed the contract tomorrow. I took step by careful step toward Stale, slowly trying not to scare him. It was like approaching a wild animal without them spooking and dashing off. The Crown Princess wants to speak with me, he said, cocking his head. Tell me, Stale, you want to see your mother, don't you? His eyes widened. All the weariness fled, replaced by sharp focus. Wait, that's the exact same line from the game as how Pride introduces the contract to Stale. Shoot! It seemed that any time I followed the plot of the game more closely, I could also remember it more clearly, like now. I retrieved the item hidden in my dress and showed it to Stale. What's that? His eyes went even wider. It's the key for those handcuffs. I snuck into Father's study and borrowed it. Now you'll be able to run away. Without those shackles, Stale could teleport away. Teleport again. In the game, Pride forced him to use that talent for assassinations. He once even used it to transport himself and the heroine outside the palace. Now, hopefully, it will take him to his mother. With the money she'd surely gotten from giving up her son, she and Stale could escape into the countryside. I can't do that. I didn't even breathe for a moment, stunned into silence. Why not? I finally asked. Mom said I can't go see her anymore, he said. I'm supposed to serve your highness, live a happy life here at the castle, and forget all about her. If I run away, my family will face terrible punishment. That's what the person from the castle told me before I came here. I don't want Mom to be punished. His knuckles turned white as he gripped his pants and stared at the floor. His eyes shone with suppressed tears. I see. So that's why he bought it when Pride said she'd let him see his mother. With Pride's official permission, his mother wouldn't face punishment. Unfortunately, that too was a lie. I couldn't do anything about the threat hanging over Stale's family. A boy adopted into the royal family would never be allowed to visit commoners. He had to be protected from assassinations and kidnappings while also exemplifying his upstanding royalty to the kingdom's citizens. I'd heard the adults saying as much, and even my 8-year-old mind could understand it. If the order came from the castle, it was set in stone. When the man from the castle first came, he wanted me to leave the next day, but I just couldn't do it, Stale said. I ran away and put up a fight, but His Royal Highness granted me 2 weeks before I had to leave. So I spent the time talking to Mom, and when we finally said goodbye, I didn't have any regrets. Then why did you try to run away before? She told me how much she loved me. Stale stopped, head hanging low, even heavier. In a hushed voice, he added, she cried so much. He went, I knew they'll just pick another kid if I managed to run away. I have a friend whose only family is his little sister, and he has a special power like me. I don't want him to end up here instead. I could hardly believe my ears. Stale was only 7 years old, and he already had such compassion for the well-being of others. Shame burned my cheeks, his words searing my heart. I'd encouraged him to act selfishly, and he'd outright refused. I definitely didn't remember this from the game. No. I'm such a terrible person. How could I be so cruel to this child? How could I make him kill his own mother? Oh, that's the act he had to do. Oh. Once he learned that Pride's promise of reuniting with his mother was just a trick to get him to sign the fealty contract, Stale came to hate Pride for what she'd done.
Let's go.
And yet, due to the binding contract, he had to obey her every order. Then, on the day before Tiara's birthday, Pride kept her word in the most horrible way possible. Stale, remember my promise? I'll let you see your mother now, she said. Then she handed him the knife. Use this to kill her, and be sure no one sees you.
I think I just left my mouth.
Oh, I hate that so much. Even I hate Pride. Eyes went wide, mouth falling open as all the blood drained from his face. Pride cackled. There it is. That's the face I wanted to see. Unable to disobey her orders, Stale murdered his mother, and in so doing, wounded his heart in a way that could never heal. Is that what I'm going to do to him too? Without the memories of my past life, perhaps, maybe I would have been just as cruel as Pride, seeking to torture a new reaction out of Stale every day, using him like a toy as amusement. Could those memories save me from becoming that sort of monster? I observed the boy curled up before me, and guilt stabbed into my gut. How could I apologize? He didn't even know what horrible things I was capable of. I just stood there with the key to the handcuffs, feeling useless and ridiculous. Thank you very much for thinking of someone like me, Stale said, presumably noticing I was at a loss for words. I'm glad you'll be my older sister, Princess Pride. It's an honor, but I don't need that key you have, so please go back to your room. I'll see you tomorrow. I lunged forward, wrapping my arms around Stale before he could finish. He was slender for a boy, even if he was a year younger than me. I felt like I might break him if I used any more force. Just how much strength and how much kindness did Stale carry in those fragile bones? I wouldn't be the one to save him, though. That role belonged to Tiara. Only her compassion and pure love could heal his scars. The more Stale found ways to protect her, unbeknownst to Pride, of course, the more her happiness became his hope in this world. He didn't lose his way even when Pride ordered him to interfere in political matters or carry out assassinations using his power. Around Tiara, he was always the kind older brother, a human and never a monster. I couldn't save Stale. I couldn't help him escape. All I could do was bind him to me for the rest of our lives, in that case, at the very least. I promise I won't cause you any more suffering, I said. I'll make it so everyone in this kingdom, including you and your mother, can spend each day with a smile on their faces. I swear it for as long as I live. The tears flowed free before I could even finish speaking. How shameful, especially in front of Stale, who must have held back so many tears in my presence. I swiped at my eyes with my arm and sniffled, still holding him tightly. Some dependable big sister I'm being right now, crying at a time like this. I mean, you show compassion. Hello. Stale stayed silent in my arms for a while. Then a knock sounded on the door, probably the guards here to usher me away. Glad I managed to stop crying. I gently detached myself from him. Stale kept his hand up, meeting my gaze. The moonlight glistened in the wetness on his cheeks. It looked like neither of us had escaped this conversation without waterworks. But I was supposed to be the one here to comfort him, not the opposite. I wiped the tears from his face with my fingertips. I'm sorry to keep you up so late, I said. Good night, Stale. I hope you get a good night's sleep. I forced a smile. Stale's lips trembled as if he was trying to offer me parting words of his own, but I couldn't make out anything he said. 10 more years. At the very least, I could use this time to do everything in my power as the Crown Princess to improve things for people like Stale. I steeled my heart around that solemn resolution and left the room with that vow in my soul. The next day, the day we were supposed to sign the subordination contract, Stale didn't show up for breakfast. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach, but a bit later, at a time of my father's choosing, Stale finally appeared. Not only that, but I swore he looked almost relaxed. He even greeted me with a good morning, Princess Pride, as he arrived. Later, we had to sign the contract before Father and a few other witnesses. The language was dry and devoid of sentiment, but I still cringed as I watched Stale write his name so earnestly with shackled hands. Father's assistant stood at his side during the signing. He looked quite a bit younger than Father, with his light blue hair tied back in a ponytail and spilling over one shoulder. Keen, slender blue eyes observed the proceedings. It took me a moment to recall the man, but when I did, I nearly gasped. Of course he looked young. That was his power, the power of eternal youth. He could alter his age at will, though I suspected his current form represented his actual age. Father seemed rough around the edges by comparison, even though he wasn't yet 30. I'd heard the man was 5 years younger than my father, but I felt their gap was even wider. Wait a minute. Neither one of them looked his age at all. I was still reeling from that when the ceremony finished. I'd assumed it would be a lot more complicated. The minister called to the ceremony. It certainly made it seem that way, but in the end, all we had to do was sign the contract, and that was it. No magical light pouring out, no booming ethereal voice, no physical change at all, aside from my heart hammering a bit harder, and Stale pressing his hand over his chest. He must have felt the same way. With that, Father removed Stale's handcuffs using the key I'd stolen last night and replaced this morning. Stale clenched and unclenched his fist, finally free of that extra weight. Let's be a happy family together from now on, my son, Father said. He set his hands on Stale's shoulders, and Stale offered a wavering smile and tiny nod. In the game, if Tiara wound up with Stale, he became the prince consort. That might not be a bad outcome for this kingdom. In ORL, Stale became a scheming, bitter man due to Pride's abuse and manipulation, but perhaps we could avoid that here if I continue to show the boy some kindness. Princess Pride. Stale scampered up to me, full of energy. It was like that heartbroken boy I'd seen the night before never existed at all. I hope the two of us do well together. I promise to protect you as well as our younger sister, he said. He placed his hand on his chest like a knight and smiled as he spoke while Father stood behind him with a relieved grin on his face. Wait, a knight? Something was bugging me about the resemblance, but I chose to focus on the boy before me instead. Thank you, Stale, I replied, but since we're family now, you don't have to call me Princess. You can call me Pride instead. Mother's assistant, my uncle, addresses her without any title. In the game, everyone called Pride Her Majesty or Queen Pride, but I didn't want to be addressed like a stranger. However, Stale hesitated, some of his exuberance fading. Oh, but I don't, he stammered. Your Highness, Father's assistant stared down at Stale and me with a stern expression. Whoa. He's handsome, even from a lower angle. Wait, I think I saw this face in the game before. Or was that later in the series? Prince Vest, the Seneschal, may refer to Her Majesty by her first name, but before commoners, he addresses her as Your Majesty or Elder Sister. Elder Sister's fine. It's formal, but not too formal. Prince Vest was my uncle, Mother's younger brother-in-law. As Mother's right-hand man, he possessed an equal amount of power as my father, the Prince Consort, making him a man of high authority in the kingdom. I see. I've hardly ever seen Mother around commoners, so I didn't know that. In that case, please call me Elder Sister around others and Pride when we're alone, I told Stale. We're family after all, so that makes us equals. With that, I reached out to shake Stale's hand. Father, his assistant, and all the witnesses gaped at the gesture. The witnesses who'd known me for a long time all cried out in shock, Is that really Her Highness? Okay, Elder Sister, Stale said, accepting my handshake. Well, it appears that Her Highness has grown into a wonderful young lady since I last saw her. Father's assistant said, but I would expect nothing less now that she's gained her precognition at such a young age. When I first heard your powers had awakened, I wasn't sure what to expect. Is that supposed to be praise, Prime Minister Gilbert? Father said, a warning in his voice. I wasn't particularly put off, however. After all, Pride grew up to be a heinous evil queen in Orel. Father's assistant Prime Minister Gilbert just shrugged. My apologies, he said, bowing his head. That was an inappropriate comment for the Prime Minister to make. What a shame that Her High Majesty could not be here to see you today. It's quite a big day for her dearest daughter, the Crown Princess. Well, we all know how busy she's been since the international discussions were decided over a month ago. Not to mention tiaras. Father smacked him on the head before he could continue. Yes, now I remember Gilbert Father's assistant. That speech of his jogged my memory, and not in the best way. I was still musing it all over when Father called for Lottie, Mary, and the other maids, as well as Jack and the rest of the guards, so we could return to the castle's residence. The whole way back, I held my new brother's hand, the hand of the heroine's brother as well. Okay, hang on. I think I'm going to end it up here. I'll see you guys in the next video.